Lights are on.
Good morning.
Thank you, Tori.
Oh, here are the notes. And red is supposed from the last meeting. Okay. I tried to. Put it.
One minute.
1 minute. Hello, my name is Marvin Hardley. Welcome to the California Department of Motor Vehicles Public Workshop for Assembly Bill 984, Alternative Registration Products. Today, we have department staff here to go through a workshop to give public input and to give members and stakeholders the opportunity to give input on the development of regulations for alternative registration products. With me here, I have Lieutenant Robert Daniels from CHP. He is the CHP Commercial Section Credentialing, Registration, Innovative Technology, and Grants Manager with CHP. Do you have any opening comments?
No, just good morning, Marvin.
Good morning. In the room, we have other DMV staff that will be assisting through the workshop. Assistant Division Chief Frank Briones and Tori Rufus. And then also from CHP, we have Sergeant Josh Clements, and with CHP, he's also with the Commercial Vehicle Section. This is being live streamed on Facebook Live and YouTube. If you have comments, and this is what we want, please send your comments and questions to DMV Rod Registration Policy at dmv.ca.gov. Once again, that's DMV ROD Registration Policy at dmv.ca.gov. You sending in your comments is really the only way we're going to be able to have a dialogue back and forth, so we encourage you to do so. First thing I want to cover is some background about alternative registration products. AB 94 was adopted in September 29th, 2022. It was to enhance existing law that requires a vehicle to display a license plate issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles with tabs that indicate the month and year the vehicle registration expires. Existing law authorizes the department to conduct a pilot program until January 1st, 2023. If certain conditions are met, to evaluate the use of alternatives to stickers, tabs, license plates, and registration cards. Under existing law, a person who alters, forges, counterfeits, or falsifies, among other things, a device issued pursuant to the pilot program is guilty of a felony. This bill would require the department to establish a program authorizing an entity to issue alternatives to stickers, tabs, plates, and registration cards under specified conditions that include, among others, approval of the alternative devices by the Department of California Highway Patrol. The bill would make this authorization applicable to environmental license plates and specialized plates displayed on an alternative device as specified. The bill would also allow failure or malfunction of an alternative device to be deemed a correctable violation as specified. The bill would also require the provider of the device to build into the device process for frequent notification if the device becomes defective and would require the provider to seek to replace devices or electronic vehicle registration cards to devices as soon as possible. The bill would also require an entity to seek approval to issue alternative registration devices or electronic vehicle registration cards, a business plan to the Department of Motor Vehicle as specified. The bill also requires the department to adopt regulations to carry out the program, including requirements establishing reasonable fees to reimburse the department for costs of implementing the program, reports, and to determine standards necessary for the safe use of alternative products, and would extend the existing authorization for the pilot program described above until the effective date of those regulations. The bill would make alteration, forgery, counterfeit, or falsification of a device issued pursuant to these provisions a felony by creating a new crime, and this bill would impose state mandated local program. The bill also would generally prohibit an alternative device from being equipped with GPS or other vehicle tracking capability, but would allow tracking technology to be installed on alternative devices used by specified vehicles, including fleet and commercial vehicles. The bill would generally prohibit an employer from using an alternative device equipped with tracking technology to monitor employees, except the bill would allow an employer to use an alternative device to locate, track, watch, listen to, or otherwise surveil an employee during work hours if strictly necessary for the performance of the employee's duties. The bill would require the employer to first notify the employee that the monitor will occur as specified, and would allow an employee to disable an alternative device monitoring capabilities, including vehicle location technology outside of work hours. The bill would impose civil penalties for a violation of these requirements and authorize the issuance of citations as prescribed. The bill would also prohibit retaliation against an employee by an employer or a person acting on behalf of employers for disabling an alternative device's monitoring capabilities outside of work hours, and would authorize an employee to file a complaint with the Labor Commissioner for violation of that prohibition. So the bill would also require the department to, by no later than January 1st, 2024, to recall any alternative devices equipped with GPS or other tracking technology that have been used pursuant to the existing pilot program to vehicles other than those specified, including fleet and commercial vehicles for which GPS or other tracking technology is authorized. The California Constitution requires the state to reimburse local agencies and school districts for certain costs mandated by the state. Statutory provisions establish procedures for making that reimbursement. The bill would provide that no reimbursement is required by this act for a specific reason. So that's the basic premise of the bill and what the department is charged to do for the alternative registration program. So we are inviting your comments and your input on developing the regulations. I will be going through some of the comments that were mentioned in the first workshop on May 5th, and I will offer opportunities for CHP or the person manning the email box to give comments based on what information you guys are sending in. So the first topic that we have is enhancements to approved alternative products. Questions that have come up, and our purpose here is, again, to ask questions. We may not have answers for each question, but we are trying to get your comments. So these are questions that you may have comments for. Enhancements to improve alternative products. What type of enhancements should the state monitor and how? Another question is there a threshold or does any enhancement need to be approved before it is launched? Is there a different threshold in the pilot program versus the permanently adopted products? The next topic here would be what should the requirements be for producing, sending, and maintaining traditional products in the vehicle? For example, does the state still produce metal license plates? And that answer would be yes. And require them in the vehicle in case the alternative product fails. And according to my interpretation of the ledge, that is, yes. Does the state need to limit the number of pilot participants as it currently does? How long should a pilot last? How does the state introduce and ensure awareness of each product, its availability, and permissive use? Is there an indicator on DMV records for the vehicle or for the product? Do we provide letters of authorization or authentication to the customer? Another question, how does the state monitor the vehicles involved? What does the state do with the current pilot products as previously authorized? These are questions that came up in the last meeting. Again, if you have comments or questions regarding those, please send those in. Another section of questions dealt with permanent adoption and revocation of alternative products. What criteria must the pilot product meet to be authorized for permanent use? How does the state approve a product for statewide use? What does the transition process look like from the pilot program to the permanent program? How does the state ensure awareness and adoption of the product for statewide use? In addition to items for pilot authorization, what else is needed for permanent adoption? How does the state determine if an alternative product's authority must be revoked? And some sub-questions on that would be, what would constitute a revocation? How would the products get recalled? And how would the state ensure awareness of the revocation or recall? So with that said, I'm going to come back to the things that were talked about in the last meeting, but I'm going to move to a couple of statements. During the pilot process, we had 3 programs that went into effect. One of them was Reviver, a company called Reviver. They had a digital license plate. And Mr. Neville Boston, who spoke at the last workshop, sent in this statement for the audience here. Reviver's primary focus is embracing and utilizing technology to improve government efficiencies and our partners' technical capabilities through the R-Plate and its platform. Given the fact that most DMVs, and in California in particular, are going through modernizations, we believe that it is a perfect opportunity to improve and enhance many manual processes to give better customer experience. We also believe that through these improved processes, we will be able to drive cost efficiencies. We are dedicated to work towards that end. We believe this is the true embodiment of a public-private partnership. So that's the statement from Reviver. They have the digital license plate, which they call the R-Plate. Another one of the products is the license plate wrap. I believe there's, as of May, there's about 6,400 of these legally operating on California roads and highways. And the statement was from the CEO, June Mendoza. LicensePlateWrap.com is the company name. And he wanted to just state good morning. And on behalf of LicensePlateWrap.com, he's glad to be a part of the program and to ensure that his products are compliant with California law. The third alternative registration product is the e-registration card. This was not in wide use, but 29 employees of the companies that produced it, which is MVSC, Motor Vehicle. I'm missing the S. Motor Vehicle Services Corporation. And then they have a newer name called V2, and that's not an acronym, that's just the name. They had 29 employees take on an e-registration card, which has all of the elements of a registration card and an app that would put that on your phone. So they experimented with that. It was a success, but it did not have more than 25 participants in it. So those are the three products. There is another product that is in contract negotiations with the department, and that is the digital license plate frame, and that has not been approved yet. But there are all kinds of ideas about different alternative registration products, and if you have ideas, if you have comments on these, please send those in. Again, to DMV, I'm trying to make sure I get it right. DMV ROD registration policy at dmv.ca.gov. Okay. So far, Lieutenant Daniels, is there anything you want to comment on any of the?
I don't have any comments at the moment.
Okay.
Maybe as questions come in, I might, or as we go further along, but at the moment, I don't have any comments at this time.
Okay. Another section of the workshop we covered was consumers and business. Questions that came up during that time was, how does the state ensure participation is voluntary? What would the state do when it is made aware that's the end of the question here. So the next one was, what should the state do when it becomes aware of a product malfunction? Within that time frame, what must the vendor do to inform the state of a malfunction? What would a vendor tell the state about the malfunction and correction plans? Another section was reporting requirements. What is the frequency of reporting? What is the content of the reporting? Would you report the participants list, any fraud reported or misuse, and any malfunctions? And what process would the department use for reporting? There were some comments in the last workshop that I'll try to go over on some of the previously mentioned topics. In relation to the question about what should a potential vendor do before approaching the state, and how can the state best prepare a potential vendor for the process, The question and answer that was mentioned in the last meeting is that according to the statute, a business plan must be submitted. And the business plan must include an administrative oversight plan, a product support plan, including but not limited to methods of providing proof of registration that are not subject to technical failures to be in the event of an alternative device malfunctioning or failing, information technology security, privacy and cybersecurity evaluations and measures to protect against unauthorized access to information and the device, procedures to comply with applicable privacy and security requirements, and ensuring that the information transmitted between the alternative device or electronic vehicle registration card, the department, and the provider is encrypted and protected to the highest reasonable security standards broadly available. In response to the statement, aside from CHP and DMV, who else needs to be consulted in the approval process? Metro Express Lanes mentioned this question, and there were no other agencies mentioned at that time. The statute ensures that DMV and CHP are in partnership for approval of alternative registration products. A representative from V2, MVSC, commented that having regular check-ins would be helpful, getting feedback from all of the departments impacted as things progress, and regular check-ins on the products would be helpful. Mr. Neville Boston from Reviver commented and agreed with John Bergman and added, what is the process that will be needed to engage and ensure good communication is going on across the board? And how do we set up a forum to discuss things so that changes can be made? In response to the questions, should vendors be in the business partner automation program? The question that came up was, if not part of the business partner automation program, what other structure for oversight would work? Neville Boston from Reviver commented on this, and he stated that being part of the business partners automation program makes good sense. He said that it allowed for transparency, and they did this when they first came on as a pilot. If other ideas for processes in the bill are there, how would they work? He asked the question. And with the modernization the DMV is going through, what are the options for vendors is another question that he asked. Being that being part of the BPA program or Business Partners Automation Program is logical, it would validate the companies. And he mentioned that if there are other ideas that can be piloted during the development process of AB 984, which is the Alternative Registration Program bill. Mr. Bergman from V2 added that any structure that is under the registration division, policy division, is good. The business partner automation program is the most advanced in the country, he stated, and adoption of multiple digital items would be allowed if it's a good structure. Anything that exists would be helpful. Other questions that came up during that process, during that section, were what about plate design modifications? Example, black or white only versus color. What type of messaging could be allowed on plates? The question came out, what about special interest plates? What role should the sponsoring agencies have in approving their plates? And what type of flexibilities, if any, should be allowed? The policy chief, Denise Burrows, here at DMV, did ask, do we need to be flexible on these types of plates? And is personalization or different fonts, should that be considered? Mr. Mark Hedrick did send in a comment about visibility is important, readability for law enforcement and public, and does it meet the intended purpose? First purpose of the plate is foremost. Desire for flexibility while serving the purpose. There would be national standards or similarities between states. Readability is important, letter size, placement, and consistency. It was also mentioned about AMVA standards. A few of the attendees had just recently returned from an AMVA meeting, and I don't want to mess up the acronym for AMVA, but I believe it's Association of American Motor Vehicle Association. And they do a lot of different standards on registration products, licensing products, and policy. It's an organization that basically unites different DMVs, states, and other organizations that deal with manufacturing of automobiles and registering and tracking automobiles. I'm going to go back to the questions now that came up. Let's see here.
Marvin, I have a comment or a few questions.
Okay, go ahead, please.
In regards to one of the questions as far as what vendors should do or potential vendors should do prior to approaching the state, I just want to pose a couple questions as far as maybe the process that's involved for testing these alternative registration products, ARPs, is that correct?
Yes.
In order to, for these to be approved, they have to go through a testing process, which CHP conducts to verify visibility. They're detectable by LPRs and such. Should these either existing vendors or potential vendors, when they're submitting either a new product or a modification to their current product, should they conduct testing themselves prior to submitting it to the state to save time, make the process more efficient from a state point of view? Because there have been some products to where they were submitted for testing, they were not able to pass the testing process, and then they were resubmitted again with no changes conducted, and again they didn't pass the testing process the second time. So should the vendors conduct some sort of testing either themselves or an independent entity to verify that it will pass the testing requirements? On the note of testing, it does take manpower and time to conduct the testing, and a lot of times, actually all the time during the testing, part of the testing process is during the hours of darkness, which is typically outside of a normal officer or supervisor shift time. So they're having to stay after their normal work hours in order to conduct the testing. So should vendors, and if I'm not mistaken, fees are mentioned in the bill,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So should vendors submit fees to the fees to the DMV in order to reimburse the state for the testing process? Maybe a reimbursable services contract or something to that effect. So I mean that's something to think about. Excuse me. Visibility is key, and I think Chief Hedrick mentioned that in some of his comments. And from a identification standpoint and a safety standpoint, I think identification is key. The whole point of a license plate is to identify the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
So if we aren't able to identify the vehicle, then I would say that the alternative registration product isn't serving its purpose. It's got to identify that vehicle first and foremost. As far as modifications, if it affects the ability to identify the vehicle, then I would say modifications probably shouldn't happen. But I would leave that up to the DMV as far as deciding from a modification standpoint. I pose a question. I'll pose a question out to those that are online right now. And if there are, I don't know if there's any parking authorities or toll authorities out there that are online right now. Have your entities had any issues identifying some of these alternative registration products that are out there? And from what I understand, most of those entities use LPRs to enforce tolls or parking. So they're probably in wider use with those entities than possibly law enforcement. So they would have, I guess, good background as far as how some of these products or how the LPRs are working with some of these products. So I'd pose that question out there. I don't know if anybody's online right now. Maybe submit your comments, or if you have questions in regards to that. I think that that was all that the notes that I took down as you were talking there. So if I have any more comments, I'll let you know.
Please, thank you. Frank, do we have any comments that have come in?
None so far.
Okay. All right. The next topic that came up was, how does the state introduce and ensure awareness and availability and permissive use about an indicator on the record? And we did get some comments about that in the last meeting, and I'll go through them. How does one of the question that came up from the question is, how does law enforcement know that a product is authorized for a particular vehicle? And how does the public know that the alternative product or the product that they're viewing is legitimate? And I think we have a question coming in. Frank.
Yeah. A question came in from Rhineland Jones from CTOC in Riverside County. The question is, or a combination of a comment and a question. There have been several license plates on the streets with what looks like non-approved DMV wrap. How will non-DMV approved vendors' products be managed?
Okay. Ryland, thank you for your comment and your question. Again, this workshop is to get information from you. We don't have an answer to that, but I can assure you that the department regulations that are in the development process is considering fraud, is considering counterfeits, and we will try our best to address those in the regulations. And we do have some great ideas so far, but if we invite you and anyone else in the audience, viewing audience online, to send in comments if you have suggestions on how we can curtail counterfeits and fraud, please send those ideas in. That's part of this development process of regs, to get the ideas, take the best, and then form regulations that can help this program to be successful and not compromise public safety or our ability to manage registration of vehicles and law enforcement to do their jobs. Another comment that came from Kit Loving from Reviver. I believe it's Kip Loving, excuse me. And he thought of a list of questions from law enforcement. He has a list of questions from law enforcement about the DMV return and how the law enforcement would like to have validation of the products. Other comments included they'd like to have validation from California DMV of products. And it was mentioned that we had provided a letter in the past, the department, for validation for CHP, but the letters were always questioned, and the department is curious about what other ideas are out there. And of course, DMV is going through a modernization project, and we want to have ideas that can be enhanced by that project, but also there are probably ideas that can come up that won't impact that, but just enhance our ability to determine, and law enforcement's ability to determine what products are valid and legitimate and which products are just something that maybe somebody decided to do to alter their plate or change the identification of a registration product. Another, I believe it's Captain Doko, mentioned that it isn't hard to duplicate vinyl adhesive products. Let's see, another one was Texas shows watermarks on their plates, and it rotates, and it shows that it's a legal plate. Can they, go ahead. Okay, can they work with CHP to develop something technological to validate a plate? They're open to collaborate with DMV and CHP, and that's from Reviver. We have another comment. Frank?
Yeah, we have a question just came in from Greg Sanders from carregistration.com. Who does an interested party contact at the DMV and or CHP to submit its proposal and documents to participate in or propose a new pilot program for the alternative registration products?
Okay, well, that would be the Department of Motor Vehicles, and you can actually get a response from that email that you just sent. There was a process for the pilot program, and there is a process being developed for the permanent program right now, and that will come out when the regs are completed. But you should be in contact with the department, and the email address that you just sent that comment to is the first start. And that would go for other companies, other interested stakeholders and parties, and including the public. If you have ideas, if you want more information about how to become a vendor, that email would be the best start. So thank you, Mr. Sanders, and you should get a response eventually to your email request. Moving on, another question that came up was, what does the state do with current pilot products that as previously authorized? And this is the furthering of the registration regulations process that we're in now. We are developing regs to establish a permanent program, and part of that process is this workshop. The workshop that we had on May 5th, featuring to how we get there, will include a hearing, time for public comment, debate, and the entire regulation process before we end up with regulations, hopefully by 2024. It's a lofty goal. We have a lot to do in a short amount of time. But we do want to have these programs, and we are trying to develop regulations. So your input is helpful. In relation to that question, the response from Reviver was that they did not think that there should be a limit. The time frame would depend on what you're trying to accomplish. For example, if a pilot was in place for 2 years, their pilot was in for 10 years. So if it has clear milestones for getting into the program and it's met with success, then it should be more about the meeting the criteria for success in order to make it a permanent product, not just a time frame. Permanent adoption and revocation of alternative products. What criteria must products meet to be recognized or authorized for permanent use? How does the state approve the product for use? The question about what does the transition look like? We are actively seeking your input. Of course, the department will write regulations towards that end, but your input is going to be helpful there. Other questions that are related to that were, what does the state have to do? What does the vendor have to do? And what does the consumer have to do? How does the state ensure awareness and adoption of the product for statewide use? Again, should all be covered in regulations that are being developed, and we are trying to get input on how we develop those regulations with your comments. It was brought up that should there be a tiered approach, and that would there be a difference for products that are high tech versus low tech? An example of that is you may have to have some different regulations for a product like the license plate wrap versus the digital license plate. Two different products that serve the same purpose, but they have a lot different capability of that the regulations may cover. AMVA, it was mentioned that AMVA has a license plate working group, and they're working with different organizations such as the SAE, NHTSA, in order to form national standards and produce standards. They're looking to updating the standards on readability for license plates, and that was brought up that we should look into what AMVA is developing in the regulation, in our development of regulations process. It was also brought up the difference between retroreflective and reflective license plates, and it was brought up, do the current products in the program meet the standards that CHP is looking for versus the cameras and the LPRs that are trying to read the license plates. The next section went into how does the state determine if alternative products authority must be revoked, what would constitute a revocation, and how would products get recalled, and how would the state ensure awareness of the recall. Excuse me. With that said, it was brought up what thresholds, what transition could we offer or retract temporary authority to the products, what transitions would look like from the process of being approved versus revocation, and what do we do with the product from the consumer standpoint? If a product was in use and that product was revoked, who's responsible for notifying the consumer, and how do we ensure that they know that they have a legal product or not? Please email our box, the email box that's mentioned, for ideas, and your feedback is very important. That's what came out in the last meeting. In response to the question, how does the state ensure participation is voluntary? It was brought up that dealerships sometimes sell these products, and it's a voluntary third-party transaction. It was brought up that used vehicles, what would be the process to transfer a product when ownership transfers? And I think I have another comment. Frank.
Yes, we have a comment question coming in from Osman Aziz from the Transportation Corridor Agencies. We have had one issue regarding digital plate, where the wrong plate number was assigned to the vehicle. This caused the registered owner of the wrong plate to receive toll violations. What type of security will be in place to avoid this kind of an issue?
Okay, that's a good comment, and that would be in reflection, a comment that should be addressed probably by Reviver. And Reviver is listening, and I'm sure if they reach out, we can get your information to them. Overall, in general, the regulations and the statute will speak to all of our products that have technology involved, meeting the highest standards for privacy and information security. And then as far as any product, technological, digital, or not, we do have a standard to be accurate with those numbers. Of course, there could be a mistake, but definitely there are protocols to ensure that license plates get applied to the right car. So there are millions of vehicles in the state of California, and I suppose that occasionally an error would happen, but you can probably get your particular issue addressed with Reviver, and we will ensure that they get your information. The next comment, a question that came up regarding that topic was, does the state monitor how participants are obtained? And that could be a reporting issue in future regulations. What role should the state have in overseeing outreach and marketing and other efforts? Gentleman Esteban from Reviver thought that this should be optional. The customer gets the plates upon registration, so getting the digital license plate is voluntary. How does the state ensure registered users of a device are aware of the GPS capability and issues and can deactivate the function? Reviver responded that the majority of plates are battery operated. GPS is mostly used with fleets. GPS can be shut off by the app and by the user. The information is not sent to anyone. And same as a cell phone, use directions that can turn it off. And it's up to the user and how they want to utilize the information that's collected. Our policy chief, Denise, commented that fleet statute is clear on employee and employer GPS technology, and that there are requirements for the GPS to have the ability to be turned on and off, and encourage all of the viewers and interested parties to comment on this in the email box that was mentioned earlier. What should requirements for product oversight and consumer support be? This is also being looked at in the regulations development. Cost. So the cost came up in the last workshop, and cost would probably impact two different things. One would be cost to operate the program and administer the program, which would involve cost of cost to the vendors to apply for the program, to get testing for the program, to get bonded as required for the program. And then the second cost would be cost to the consumer. How much do the products cost? Are they one-time costs, monthly costs? And so some of the comments that came up were right now the DMV has vehicle title and registered and reg card indicia produced. How can we make it more efficient? California prison authorities, prison industry authorities, and DMV costs are available. CHP is not involved in those figures. The question was brought up, is CHP looking at a cost? And it should be something with the digital license plate. Is that reasonable? So the question, I think, on that is about testing, administrative costs for testing. Another comment that came up is, should the process be allowed? Is the current process okay? Is there cost savings involved in the testing that can be gained if we change the testing process? It was mentioned earlier about testing the product before it comes to the CHP testing. Of course, that would probably save costs if you don't have to go back and forth with separate tests. And then how can the tests be done, and when can they be done to save time, perhaps in groups? They mentioned that previously they couldn't test in groups because of the statute, so maybe there's an efficiency that can be gained there. What are we willing to change on the baseline was a question. So I would invite more specific suggestions and comments as to what baselines we're talking about, specifics on how money or cost can be saved by making changes to the testing process. And then maybe just some suggestions in what group testing would mean. Is that group testing of products from one particular vendor, or are we talking about group testing for several different products from various vendors?
I have a somewhat related question or statement. In relation to cost, I mean, obviously testing does cost. To test the product, it does cost for us to do that. However, going back to, I guess we're somewhat related to my original statement where, the vendor may resubmit the product over and over for testing, and, no change has been done to try and improve the product's readability. So should the vendor submit some kind of document showing that they have made changes in an attempt to improve readability, to maybe limit the number of times testing is required or done, which would in turn save costs as a result. Because if they're just constantly resubmitting the product, it's costing the state resources to conduct that testing. Where if they do submit that statement of changes being made, it would reduce the number of testing being conducted, most likely.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. A statement of changes that have been made from one test to another.
Correct.
To ensure that we're not just testing, or you're not just testing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Hoping that a different condition might alter the results.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So, it was said by CHP, and this might be a repeat, but that vendors should have some responsibility to have their products tested through other companies first before moving forward with the product and the testing. It was responded that there is a ton of research that's being done by these companies. This is from Reviver, and they understand that it's on the vendor to make sure they've done their research and homework. They don't want to waste time and if committed to changes, everyone needs to get on board. It was also commented by Paul with Safe Coalition representing AV interests, and he mentioned 3 things: setting performance standards with technology neutrality, looking at the vehicle code to make sure there are no conflicts. He asked a question: are we thinking the plate may need to be built into the vehicle? And flexibility is needed. License plate registration use may be different with an autonomous vehicle. And he asked, are there any statutes of interest when it pertains to autonomous vehicles and alternative registration products? He stated that the vehicle code states that we must have the registration in the vehicle, and that is something that we may need to look at expansively. The LP code now versus what is the license plate codes in the future.
I think we have a question or comment.
We have another comment. Frank, please.
Yes, a question came in from Byron Nufflin from the city of Palmdale. And the question is, if a vehicle is left sitting and the battery dies, do the plates still show the license plate number? And if so, for how long? And question number 2, are there any precautions for someone who can install a kill switch for the plate, such as if the vehicle is being used for a crime, that they could turn it off? The digital license plates,
Okay.
I'm sure.
Those are good questions. Thank you for those. We can make sure we consider those in regulations development, and there may be a response for that from the digital license plate provider, which is Reviver. That kind of brings up some of the topics that we have related to the next question that we were talking about. Privacy and security. The department shall not receive or retain information generated because of the program regarding the movement, location, use of any vehicle participating in the program. The question was brought up, what about law enforcement? What about Amber Alerts? What about stolen vehicles? And what about vehicles that are involved in other crimes? It was mentioned by the question was asked by law enforcement, have vendors encountered theft of the alternative registration products and what was done with those? Reviver did comment that customer service, when notified that a plate is stolen, goes through a process that confirms that a police report was given, and then guidance is given to the customer. Internally, they use technology to find the plate, depending on the technology the plate has. They have been served subpoenas in the past, and compliance with those are indicated in their process. A case of an embezzled vehicle and theft notification was transmitted to the plate, and the vehicle was located by law enforcement. They cooperate with law enforcement. They mentioned that they have search warrants served on Reviver regarding criminal cases in which the digital license plate was picked up on a camera. Question was asked from Reviver, since the digital license plate is personal property, does this cause an issue? And it was mentioned that these plates in the future could display messages such as stolen, amber alerts, silver alerts, and statute does indicate any sequence that needs to be displayed. One of the things that came up is privacy and privacy with the digital plates. and more commentary was given about DMV not retaining information, but that CHP could retrieve and retain information regarding plates that were involved in any of the aforementioned Amber Alerts, stolen vehicles, other crimes, etc. A Reviver staff, Esteban, commented that the bill was written prior to privacy regulations, and they feel that the standards would suffice. And I think we were talking about, at that time, determining data sharing, privacy, and security protocols, GPS and other technologies. How can the state ensure the vehicle location technology can be disabled? And how does the state monitor this? Should this be monitored only by the owner of the vehicle or by the driver? And I think the statute speaks to that. Again, we're making our way through the comments that were questions that we were asked during the last workshop to intrigue interested parties to make comments and give feedback for the development of the regulations. So again, if you're listening and you have your own ideas or your own comments, if you want to get a comment or an idea or a question into the record, please go ahead and email that comment in. We're working our way through the questions that we have put together from information that we've gathered from stakeholders, government agencies, and internally within the department. And I'll continue with that, but we definitely invite your comments and the things you're interested in as it pertains to alternative registration products. This topic the next topic was fraud prevention and product misuse or malfunction. And the questions that were asked: what steps should the state take to prevent fraud and misuse? What should the state do when it is made aware of such? What does the state do when it becomes aware of a product malfunction? What is the time frame that a vendor must inform the state of the malfunction? And what should the vendor tell the state about the malfunction and correction plans? So a lot of that is covered under reporting, and those are all good questions that are being considered in the development of the regs. San Diego Police Department, SDPD, commented last time that a vendor should provide detailed outline of how they will prevent theft and fraud in their products. They also commented that the vendor should provide steps on how they will prevent fraudulent activity. And if San Diego PD or if any other law enforcement has suggestions on things that need to be in the regulations or things that would assist with law enforcement with the duties and assist in fraud prevention, please, you can comment in the email box, or you have other ways to contact the department. But your concerns are want to be addressed. We want to address those, and we really want the input. Mr. Loving from Reviver Company, he did mention that Reviver has an active program that they have training on the digital license plate. They've been doing this for a while. They get feedback from the trainings, and it shows what they see in the field, the ideas from DMV investigators and CHP and other agencies. They've been training law enforcement across the state for years now, and it's positive feedback. Some of the ideas from DMV investigators and CHP is, can we do a barcode for validation? Can the last four of the VIN be involved? And Reviver has mentioned they can do that, and that they are very interested in preventing fraud. When the question of amber and silver alerts was brought, the comment response from Reviver is, can we get better understanding of what's required in California, and that other states in Arizona, for example, they have some standards for what to do in those cases. Silver alerts, amber alerts. That a lot of the things that we mentioned earlier come up to relate to the next topic, which is reporting requirements. So input on what should the department require in regulations as far as reporting is what this topic is concerning. And again, the comments that came up or that were generated were frequency, how often to report content, what should the reports contain. Should it list the participants? Should it list the fraud and misuse and equipment malfunctions? The next topic that came up was new issues and other items for regulatory consideration. So the next steps in the regulatory process were drafting the regulatory language based on the meetings that we're having and the comments that we're getting from general public in the state of California, from various stakeholders, our vendors and government entities, including DMV and several of the parking and toll agencies. And Denise Burrows, our policy chief, and CHP, I believe Captain Hedrick, is it?
Chief Hedrick.
Chief Hedrick, and is it Chief Doko?
Captain Doko.
Captain Doko. Okay, I'm getting those mixed up. I think we had a problem with that last time. It's hard for us DMV people to realize, but Captain Doko, I'm going to get this messed up again. They thank everyone for their comments and their input, and again, it is welcomed. Okay, there are a few more topics to go through. Again, we're welcoming your comments. It was mentioned that the regulations will hopefully answer what types of plates are eligible to participate, what types of other products should the state be prepared for. So some of the companies out there, some of the potential vendors, you may have ideas for alternative registration products that the department has not thought of or that we have thought of, but you may be the entity that helps bring that into fruition. So please, if you want to participate, we would like to know what types of products that you're thinking about as early in the process as possible. We don't want the regulations to interfere with products that are going to help meet the goal of providing alternatives to what we currently do. We just want to ensure that they meet all the safety standards, can pass the testing and identify vehicles. And so please send any ideas that you have in. Requirements for product size, design, display, and functionality were mentioned that will have to be addressed. What types of flexibilities could and should be allowed? What about special interest and recognition license plates? What role should sponsoring state agencies have in approving their their plate for alternative product use? And what about plate design modifications? Example, the black and white versus color and other messaging. So I think that I have covered most of the topics that we had in our last workshop. Are there any other comments, Frank? No comments. Let me see here. Make sure that we've covered everything. We've highlighted notes from our last workshop. We've talked about our alternative products background. And we've discussed some of the regulatory considerations that we have mentioned from the department and involving CHP, testing, costs, fraud prevention, misuse, and we've talked about our next steps. I want to make sure, if you have comments, these might be your last moments, please go ahead and get those logged in. And I'm pretty sure that I've covered all of the topics that came up in the last meeting. Just double checking on that. Okay, I'm going to end by going to the statute, AB 94. What is it requiring the department to do? So if you have additional comments, or if you're thinking about it, or if your company needs to get together as a group and then come up with statements or suggestions for our regulatory process, these are the things that the statute is requiring the department to do. Specifically, the department shall adopt regulations to carry out the program, including, but not limited to, all of the following. A, determining standards necessary for safe use and alternative products. B, requirements for product oversight and consumer support. C, requirements for product size, design, display, and functionality. D, introduction of new products through a pilot program. E, transitioning pilot products and approved enhancements to existing alternative products to a statewide product offering. F, approval of products for statewide use. G, determining data sharing, privacy, and security protocols pursuant to Section 1 of Article 1 of the California Constitution's right to privacy and other applicable privacy laws. H, processes for revoking an alternative product's authority for use. I, testing enhancements to approved alternative products. J, determining the types of plates eligible to participate and associated approval processes. K, establishing reasonable fees to reimburse the department for the cost to implement the program. L, reporting requirements. M, requirements to ensure registered users of a device are aware of the GPS capability and usage and can deactivate the function. N, requirements to ensure non-registered vehicle operators are aware of GPS capability and use. This may include, but is not limited to, live notifications of the GPS function, toll-free communication with the device provider for vehicle location function, status, and deactivation, or visual indicators of GPS capability or usage. I think we have another comment or question. Frank.
Yes, Kip Loving from Reviver wanted to clarify something related to the battery being disconnected, question earlier. And Reviver is saying that the digital license plate does not require any power to display the license plate image. It only requires power to make a change. So if a battery is removed from the vehicle, there would be no change in the image displayed.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for that clarification, Kip. Okay, I think that will conclude the information that I have to provide based on the questions that were brought to the department prior to this workshop. It also includes the questions and comments that were provided to the department before in the last workshop. So again, we can continue to take your comments and questions in the email box provided, DMV registration policy at dmv.ca.gov. And this would conclude. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, just thank you for having us here. I just want to reiterate that, the Highway Patrol's main concern is identification. We want to be able to identify the vehicle, and that the alternative registration product clearly identifies the vehicle for public safety and, law enforcement safety. It's key in being able to identify the vehicle. I know that the statute or the bill here that was put forth, it does require that alternative registration products meet the testing requirements before they're part of the pilot program or they're authorized for use. So another concern could be, there are alternative registration products out there that don't meet the testing requirements. So how do we address those? And there's a lot of them out there. So that's something that may have to be looked at as well. So.
Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank the CHP for their participation. I want to thank the Office of Public Affairs, Chris Orick and the team there helping us put on this workshop. And I want to thank the DMV policy staff, that the team that's helping to draft the regulations and keep us on track, doing all of the research, the writing. Your contribution is welcomed and is appreciated. So with that, I'll be signing off, and thank you for attending the second workshop for alternative registration products.